Hi all. Today we're going to look at how to create our own simple tilt EQ inside of Logic with no external plugins. So very quickly, what is tilt EQ? It's basically two wide high and low shelving filters. The resulting curve allows us to simultaneously boost and cut to either end of the frequency spectrum. This is advantageous when mixing because unlike boosting or cutting as you normally would, tilt EQ allows us to brighten or darken the audio without destroying the spectral balance we'd crafted at an earlier stage. If you want to learn more about tilt EQ, I'll leave some links in the description so you can explore further. For me personally, I like to use tilt EQ during the initial stages of a mix session while my ears are fresh to quickly get a good balance between highs and lows and before moving on to surgical adjustments with a second EQ on any given channel. So the all-important question, how do we set this up inside of Logic without handing over any money to third-party plugin companies? Well, it's relatively simple to do inside of Logic's Smart Controls, which we access via the View menu up here, or by using the shortcut B. For this tutorial, I'll be using this short loop that I want to brighten up. As I play this back, I will adjust the tilt EQ I already have to demonstrate the effect on a small mix of instruments. Okay, so for this example, I want to place my tilt EQ on a mix bus. We have one here. And in order to use smart controls, we need to first select the bus channel, go up to options and select create tracks for selected channel strips. With that done, we need to employ a channel EQ that will become our tilt EQ. So we can do that either by selecting the channel EQ from the menu here or just clicking this area here to bring up the channel EQ on the mix bus. Next, I'm going to deactivate just all of the bands that we're not going to be using. So as I say, this is just a high and low shelf, so we only need these two bands in activation. The important step at this point is also to match the frequencies of these two bands because this will define the crossover later on when it comes to actually using this like a tilt EQ. At this point, if we bring up these smart controls by pressing B, you'll see that down here under the controls tab, we actually have no options in here. A simple way around this is just to import a random effects unit, something other than an EQ. So we'll put a bit crusher in here, for example, and then immediately just deactivate the bit crusher. We just need to finally then reset some of these controls. Right now, you'll see that the controls in the bit crusher, these are the controls we're going to use to trigger our tilt EQ. They're currently assigned to different parameters inside the bit crusher. So to remove these, we just come over to the cog here and click delete all patch mappings. Now we can begin assigning custom mappings by selecting the first control so that it's highlighted blue, and then coming over to the parameter mapping editor, which is this area over here. For this first control, we want to be able to change both the frequency of the high and low shelf in unison. So clicking the drop-down menu on the target here, we can select within the channel EQ the first thing we want to control, which is the high shelf frequency. Next, we can select the cog just above this area to add a second mapping, and making sure we've got the second mapping selected. Again, the drop down button there, channel EQ, and this time we're looking for low shelf frequency. We now have a single control for frequency of both the high and the low shelf bands, and we can see that if we toggle this knob here, we'll be able to see the values up here in the EQ changing, the frequency values that is. Next, we want a control for the gain of our tilt EQ. So we start by selecting the next available control, so it's highlighted blue, and then going over to the parameter mapper editor again, First up, we want to select the target of the high shelf gain. So it's in channel EQ, high shelf gain. And then same as before, add a second mapping. And this time selecting the second mapping, we're going to go channel EQ and low shelf gain as well. It's just important at this point that we invert the low shelf gain. Finally, then we can repeat the process once more to get more control over the Q shape. So selecting the control parameter that is next available. And then coming over to the map area, we've got channel EQ, high shelf Q factor, adding a second mapping, and looking for the low shelf Q factor. And this one can be left as default, and this should now give us control over the Q shape of our tilt EQ. To finish up then, what we can do is we can save this setup. This is fully completed now, so we can come up to the mixer view. This is the channel strip that we've applied the tilt EQ to. You can save this setup by clicking at the top here in setting, and you can either save channel strip setting as something and recall it in other projects, or if you're sticking within the same project, you just copy the strip setting and paste it onto another channel, and it will paste exactly as we have here, the channel EQ and the bit crusher, but most importantly, the channel EQ linked to all of these controls that we have in the smart control window. And that's it. I hope this tutorial helps. Drop me a like and a comment if it does, and I'll see you in the next video.